Hi, my name is Grace, and today I'll be giving you a little information on a drug called U-47700, also sometimes known as pink. In January of 2016, a man was found dead in his home in the city of Kaysville, Utah. His autopsy showed that his cause of death was not due to disease or natural causes. A toxicological analysis of blood and urine samples, as well as drug powder found in his body, showed that the man ingested the known drugs quetiapine, amphetamine, amitriptyline, mexadrone, and ketamine. However, there was still another unidentified substance. In March of 2016, a case report published by Elliott, Brandt, and Smith identified this unknown substance as U-47700. This was the first known fatality caused by the drug. As a quick note about its name, users of the drug primarily referred to it as U-47700 and claimed the name pink was a code name made up and used by law enforcement and media. I'll be referring to the drug as U-47700 throughout this presentation. Other names include Pinky, U4, and pink heroin. Let's go into a bit of history behind this drug. U-47700 was first synthesized in 1976 by scientists Philip B. von Voigtlander and Jacob Smuchkowitz at the pharmaceutical manufacturing firm Upjohn. The aim of their research was to develop a pain reliever for use in surgery, for treating cancer patients, and for painful injuries, but which would have less potential for addiction compared to other drugs. The proposed benzamide compounds, a derivative of benzoic acid, was found to be more potent than morphine, according to the report by the NIDA. A patent was filed in 1987 and granted in 1989 for the drug, but eventually expired in 1997 due to failure to pay maintenance fees. The patent contained info that described its method of synthesis, which unfortunately made it conveniently available for the general population to replicate it. In 2015, U-47700 resurfaced. The reason for this occurrence was that in the beginning of 2015, China banned the export of 116 synthetic opioids, all of which contained fentanyl and other similar compounds. According to a report by the DEA, in order to bypass this ban, certain Chinese manufacturers would supply altered versions of fentanyl to Americans. Thus, this drug was most likely synthesized by following the available reaction mechanism of Smuchkowitz and von Voigtlander, published back in 1982. Because of this, U-47700 has a classification as a designer drug, which is a synthetic analog of a legally restricted, prohibited drug devised to circumvent drug laws. Other examples of well-known designer drugs include spice and bath salts. China continues to be a major provider of U-47700, as well as many other opioids. Let's look into the neurobiological insights behind this drug. Using a guinea pig brain, it was determined that U-47700 is an opioid that acts as a strong agonist at mu opioid receptors. It is a weaker agonist for the kappa opioid receptor and a poor agonist at the delta opioid receptor. As with other mu opioid receptor agonists, the binding of this drug activates the coupled inhibitory G protein to alter the effects of different ion channels. These altered channel functions are implicit in the analgesic effects upon binding to the mu opioid receptors due to their inhibitory effect on pain fibers. Dopamine release is also linked to binding of mu opioid receptors. The effects of this drug can be reversed quickly with administration of noxolone, an opioid antagonist. The chemical name of this drug is trans-3,4-dichloro-N-2-dimethylamino cyclohexyl N-methylbenzamide. It is a structural isomer of the known opioid analgesic drug AH7921, discovered in the 1970s. AH7921 is a Schedule I drug along with U-47700. This picture shows types of synthetic opioids that have emerged on the research chemical market. While U-47700 is relatively new, AH7921, MT25, and acetylfentanyl have been under international control for a while. You may be wondering, if there are so many synthetic analogs, how is U-47700 even selected by the scientists as a potential analgesic among all others? The synthesis of U-47700 was the result of thorough analysis into the relationship between the scaffold of the receptor and its subsequent activity. By looking at key functional groups contributing to the greatest activity, the Upjohn company eventually narrowed down over a dozen related compounds they patented, of which some are shown here, to U-47700, which is the most active when bound to the receptor. If you combine the relative novelty of U-47700 with its Schedule I classification, what you end up with, at the present, is no controlled human studies regarding its symptoms, toxicity, dependence potential, or abuse potential whatsoever. While we're on the topic of lack of information, I wanted to make a quick detour. If you Google pink drug or U-47700 as I did when I first started researching my topic, you'll notice many news websites with a headline something along the lines of the drug being at least 700% more potent than heroin. However, I wasn't able to find any backing of this fact anywhere. Since U-47700 is synthesized in illegal labs in China, There is no way to have a supply of the drug consistent enough to even determine this statistic at the moment. Even when it was first synthesized in 1976, the drug was also not tested beyond animals and had become intended for use solely in research. However, since it is a mu-opioid agonist, U-47700 is theorized to have effects that are characteristic of other opioids, and the reported symptoms shown here are all based on user reports, many of which are characteristic of typical opioids. The UN Office on Drugs and Crime described it as having effects very similar to morphine and heroin, but with a significantly shorter duration of action. It has been reported that the effects of respiratory depression caused by U-47700 is stronger than that of heroin and morphine, while sedation effects have also been reported as stronger than oxycodone. The sensations of both physical and cognitive euphoria have been reported as less intense as other opiate compounds as well. As we have learned, the wide variety of symptoms is due in part to the distribution of the receptors in the body, since receptors are present in the CNS, GI tract, heart, liver, and lungs. Though there have been no human studies, users report that similar to other opioids, U-47700 is moderately addictive, yet has high potential to be abused. There is no official half-life for this drug, and various drug forms all have widely varying times. Similar to other known opioids, consistent use of U-47700 builds tolerance. Based off of U-47700's similarity to more commonly studied opioids, I attribute tolerance to receptor desensitization as a result of downregulation, as well as upregulation of drug metabolism and opponent processes. U-47700 also has cross-tolerance properties, in that tolerance to one opioid causes tolerance towards other opioids. Withdrawal, going off users' experiences, usually present themselves after anywhere from 2 to 4 hours after the last dose. This is a timeline of events during one administration of the drug, based on users' personal anecdotes, which I found really interesting, and I put the numbers into a chart for a better comparison of the duration of steps. Also, according to user reports, ingestion of the drug is through oral, intravenous, rectal, inhaler, and snorting methods. The drug has the appearance of a white powder or as a liquid for use in inhalers. Let's move on to its relevance in society. Between 2015 and 2016, the DEA has received at least 46 reports of deaths in association with the drug. Fatalities have been reported in New York, New Hampshire, Ohio, Texas, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. There have been no reports of incidences involving the drug prior to 2015. The death of Prince in April of 2016 is largely attributed to a combination of fentanyl and U-47700. Effective as of November 14, 2016, the DEA has temporarily classified it as the Schedule I drug of the Controlled Substances Act in response to an imminent hazard to the public safety. Prior to its scheduling, both Florida and Ohio had both already emergency scheduled the drug. In the UK, the Psychoactive Substances Act of 2016 was implemented to regulate the availability of U-47700 and similar drugs. In Finland, a government decree was passed in 2015 to control availability of psychoactive drugs, including this one. Sweden also made it illegal for possession of U-47700 in January of 2016. In general, the drug presents a problem for forensic labs. Since the drug is a relatively novel one, these labs don't usually look for them in their routine procedures. According to the DEA, abusers of U-47700 are likely also abusers for heroin, prescription pain opioids, narcotics, and designer opioids. The drug itself is cheap. Prices start at around $30 a gram. For comparison, a gram of cocaine goes for around $60 to $80. Since the product originates from overseas, there's literally no way to tell the identity, purity, or quality of substances purchased. As a result, it is easy and common to ingest the product unknowingly with drugs such as fentanyl or heroin. It is often packaged in a way to mimic heroin bags or opioid tablets. According to a toxicology case report in July of 2016, there have even been cases in which U-47700 was misleadingly sold as Norco, the very drug that is supposed to reverse the effects of the opioid. When you look at some of the circumstances surrounding this drug, its recent popularity isn't too unexpected. Take a drug that is readily accessible online and relatively cheap. Combine that with a marketable name given by media who also misleadingly label it as 7 times stronger than heroin. Add in the fact that it's an opioid in general, and with that, you've got a drug that's become a nationwide problem.